It's the first foreign ministers meeting since South Africa took over the presidency of the G20 in December. Our host, Ronald Lamola, already has his hands full, as we've been discussing, following American Secretary of State Marco Rubio's decision to boycott this G20 foreign ministers meeting over his government's unhappiness with South Africa. So Vuyo will just talk to us more about some of the expectations there. And one of the concerns that people do have, Vuyo, is whether the absence of Marco Rubio is going to put a spanner in the works, especially given the fact that the two-day meeting is expected to set the tone and the agenda for the year.
Indeed, Iman, conspicuous by his absence, of course, at this meeting will be the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has already indicated that they will not be coming. But, of course, we also heard, or rather read, this morning that next week the Secretary, Treasury Secretary will also not be coming. He did also send a tweet that said that he will not be coming next week. But of course, South Africans are not having sleepless nights. The hosts are adamant that things are not only going to go ahead, but they are going to be run smoothly. And the person whose responsibility it is to ensure that everything does indeed run smoothly is the Director General of International Relations, Zane Dangor. So Dangor, I know a lot has been said about the Americans and what this all means. But I guess in an opener, as this particular meeting is going to be, there's a great deal of importance attached to setting the right tone, but also making everyone comfortable and assured that things will indeed not run only smoothly, but you will stick to the agenda, irrespective of who's here and who's not.
Yes, so aside from the U.S. delegations not coming, we've got a relatively full house. If you've been to foreign minister meetings before, Brazil and India, this is about the numbers that you're going to get. You'll normally not get all foreign ministers there. Always be a few that will send deputies. So we're having a few that are sending the deputies, but by and large, we have the numbers that we need to have a successful meeting. It's a pity that the U.S. could not send more senior delegations because, in fact, they are part of the Dirco. That's the important component of it, is that with the Dirco meetings, there's normally coordination between the past president, the current president, and the future president at all levels, at Sherpa level, at ministerial level, and at head of state level. So let's see whether we're going to get to that point still during the course of this year. Our agenda has been set. Our agenda has been approved by our cabinet. It's been approved by the G20, including the U.S. administration, of course, because the previous administration was quite supportive of it. So at the very first Sherpa meeting, we did present our themes, and there was overwhelming support for the issues that we want to put on the table. And that's what we're going to carry through.
The president said after the handover, when he formally, well, at least symbolically then before the 1st of December, he did say in Rio de Janeiro that he's not going to back off from focusing global attention on the continent, but also on the global south, and that he needs progress when it comes to shared goals, including, of course, issues of the climate change, which, of course, as we all know where the current president or the new president of the United States stands on those matters. Is that going to change things or focus at all?
No, I think that the G20 members, climate change is an enormously important issue. So there's always been agreement on the need for climate change, guided by the science. Keeping the temperatures beyond 2% has been a goal. What we've been debating and negotiating on is how do we implement it from a financing perspective. What is the share of the burden of the North, the historical polluters versus the South? We essentially have been, in terms of pollution, not that significant, but in terms of impact, feeling it the most. So those are the kind of issues where we'll still be discussing and debating. And of course, as the President said, we will profile the African agenda and what's the priorities for Africa, but also the global South. And that agenda is what we put out right from the start. And it's a continuation, really, of what Indonesia, India, and Brazil did. But even solidarity was high on the agenda of Italy. Italy took over the presidency in the wake of COVID, and the notion of interdependence was part of the global agenda then. So that continuum is more than 5 years now on the agenda, and is our view. Our job is to ensure that we take it from discussion to implementation.
Of course, I mean, you will have seen President Donald Trump's comments over the past few weeks, especially around Israel, for example, that they are an ally of Israel, and that's his interpretation of solidarity, whereas many people see our interpretation as South Africa of solidarity as going with people who are vulnerable. I mean, we know our position around the issue of Palestine, which is where people think there may come a lot of divergent views, which may just perhaps spoil the mood, especially at the open or from the onset.
No, I think if you look at the summit in Brazil, and you look at the paragraphs on geopolitics, what South Africa, Brazil, and many others done, we played a leading role in drafting those paragraphs. In India, we drafted it to focus on what can we all agree on, and what we could all agree on. In the end, after hard negotiations, a few delegations had to be persuaded. But we could all agree on the UN Charter. We could all agree on certain international legal norms. That included that you cannot acquire land through the use of force or through any other unlawful means. And that was in the Leaders Summit in Delhi. We took that a little further in Brazil, where we started mentioning what this means for Palestine and Ukraine and other places. So there's a normative framework that everybody agrees to. People may not agree, some may not agree with a charge of genocide. We believe that the evidence is there. We've taken it to the correct forum. The correct forum in global governance is the ICJ, and we're obligated to do that under the Genocide Convention. If people feel differently and they feel that their ally is not guilty of mass murder with intent, they should provide the evidence through the court. They part of the UN. The ICJ is within the Charter of the UN. What you do as a responsible global citizen is take your issues to the appropriate forum, make your case, and let the judges there decide. The ICJ. I know the ICC is different because it's a treaty-based one, so they're not a state party to the ICC, but over 110 states are, mostly African states, Latin American states. As you can see, the smaller states who cannot depend on military power or any other forms of power to influence the world. We use the institutions of global governance for access to justice, to make our views heard. And we feel that we've got the support of the G20 overall on that. People will say, we may differ with you, but going to the court is the correct avenue. And that's what we've done.
Of course, and that, though, hasn't stopped the president, the re-elected president of the United States, to make the kinds of comments that he made around what they would want to do in the Middle East. But the president's going to open the meeting around 2 o'clock, set the tone, state and restate, to emphasize some of the issues we've spoken about already, commitments he has already made publicly on various forums. At the G20 in Brazil, in Parliament this year. Take us through what would then happen as soon as that formal part is done.
So the president opens it. He basically re-emphasizes what our agenda would be, the themes, the context in which this G20 takes place, the global context. And after that, the foreign ministers take over. So the foreign ministers would be focusing on the overall agenda, but with this particular focus on the geopolitics. What we've done, and it's something that we've agreed to with Brazil, and it was followed through, is geopolitics will be dealt with at the Sherpa level, the foreign ministers level, and the leaders level, so that we don't have the geopolitics discussed at every single working group. let them deal with
to
AI
the exclusion
to
of
the
many
exclusion
other
of the stuff. And we will try to stick to that as much as possible. We cannot stop senior politicians from other sectors talking about geopolitical issues, but it doesn't stop them from agreeing on the key issues that is sector specific. We will develop the language in geopolitics. The foreign ministers will drill down on it a bit more, and there'll be a second foreign ministers meeting in New York at the UN, where these things will be finalized.
Zane Dangor, let me thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Of course, this is the man who will be taking care of things at those behind closed door meetings when at times people will be slugging it out, fighting over certain positions until, of course, they find resolutions to whatever problems, or however they may be intractable during those sessions. And that's where we're going to leave it for now. Iman Rapeti, geopolitics, as you correctly pointed out, going to be the big topic of today.